I'm so excited to have Celeste Pereira here today. And Celeste, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I was just telling you off camera that it's been a really intense week. And so I'm very excited about the fact that it's Friday and that I'm going to get to rest this weekend. But outside of that, thank you so much for inviting me on your amazing podcast.
Well, thank you. I love the content that you produce. It's so informative, and I'm excited to speak with you. You're a physiotherapist, is that correct?
Yeah, I am. I have my own online clinic and I do see some people in person, but mostly around the world. I have different clients that dial in on Zoom and then we do different sessions and we evaluate their nervous system online and we get some pretty intensely good results, even though it's not in person.
That's cool. And you're also a yoga teacher.
I am, yeah. I'm lucky enough to have my own app and I teach twice a week in London. And yeah, I just absolutely love teaching yoga. I taught for many years and then the pandemic hit and we had to all pivot online.
Yeah.
And now that we're back in person again, wow, what a gift, hey? What a gift to be back with the real people in the flesh.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you already up to speed with having an app prior to the pandemic, or is this something that you put all together because of?
It was actually something I put together just as it finished.
Hmm.
Um, And yeah, gosh, what an experience that has been. It's a lot of work to run an app, but what's actually been so nice about it is that there are different people around the world that I get to connect with who ordinarily I wouldn't have had the chance to. So yeah, it's been really good for that reason.
That is so cool. I know it's something that I think it looks amazing whenever I see somebody put one together, and I think I want to do it. And then I'm taught about how much work it would take, and I go, "Oh my goodness!" So how do you manage all that? What is your trick, your strategy for doing the marketing that is required as a self-employed professional?
I think one of the biggest, I mean, I think one of the biggest things I'd like to share with your audience is there is a myth in the world of being self-employed that you want to have multiple streams of income. And so what a lot of us do is, sorry, this is a little bit off piste from your question, but just bear with me.
Please, please.
A lot of us do is we hear this advice, and so I'm speaking for myself now, but I wrote a book, I teach classes, I ran retreats and events and teacher trainings, and I started an app. And I then started really digging a bit deeper into people that really make it, like really make their business viable. And they often only have one big thing that they're working on. Maybe a little side thing, but very, very often what I'm finding now is that there isn't enough time to market everything effectively and to really nail it. And so one of the big things that this year has been about is actually tying up loose ends and actually trying to say no to more projects and then pivot so that we're taking just one main project and letting that be the main thing that you work on. Because
Yeah.
it's a very good question. How do you have time to market everything and to run it well? And the real answer is, if I'm very honest, I'm so stretched to an absolute brink. And it shouldn't be like that for us. We should be working extremely hard and we should be able to pause and step away from it and think, okay, now time to get inspiration. So that when I go back to the thing, there is, something left in the tank. And I think that has been the biggest learning for me is this myth of having multiple streams of income is really not sustainable unless you have a massive team, which most of us, we don't have access to that.
Yeah. Great advice. I appreciate that. Do you find that you've been able to employ that same theory and technique to other parts of, say, like your exercise routines or your exercise approach?
That's so funny. And I actually, now that you're asking that question, I'm realizing it's a theme in my life to dip my big toe into the proverbial ocean and hope that some of its wisdom will come into me. Because I would say I'm similar in the approach to my exercise. Like
Yeah.
I compare myself. Sorry, that was my wake up alarm from my afternoon nap.
No worries.
6 minutes late.
Yeah.
um, basically, love climbing, and I'll use the example of a good friend of mine who I climb with. She's just obsessed with climbing, and so that's all she does, and she's really good at climbing.
Mm.
But I would get so bored if all I did was climb, and I absolutely love going to calisthenics. I quite like just the fact that there's other people in the room, and I can watch them struggling with pull-ups, and then some other people getting it. I love lifting weights. I don't have a community that I do that with, but I have a gym in my building. So I go and I lift weights. I'm obsessed with kite surfing, obsessed,
Oh, cool. I kite surf too.
obsessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you? Oh my
Yeah.
God, we have to connect over that.
Yeah.
And so any chance I get, I'm in the water. But
Yeah.
I don't just do one thing. I also love dancing. I love yoga. So I wish I could say there was just the one path for me with that, but really I dipped my
Yeah.
big toe in
Yeah.
again, as I said.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one to just I'm only gonna do one thing.
For me, for sure, I think they're
Yeah.
like I mentioned, my friend who's really into rock climbing, she's
Mm.
so determined with that. Like that's her one thing. And I was trying to imagine myself giving up something to get good at one thing, and I just genuinely couldn't.
In relation to coaching your clients, then, and you find someone that comes to you with an injury, and perhaps I'm guessing you might investigate, like, what are your daily activities? What are you doing? Are you generally coaching people to try to diversify, to be able to heal? Or what is do you have a standard approach that you use in relation to that?
It's a difficult one because it really depends on the person. And I would say that if I had someone who is doing the same thing every single day, and when I say, for example, I don't know, like a set sequence like Ashtanga, all they do is that every single day, they don't do anything else, I do tend to encourage them to diversify.
Yeah. Yep.
But I'll give you a quick example. I just had my physio session that just ended before you. She's a dancer and she does a variety of different movements. I mean, so complex, her movement history. And she does a lot of different therapeutic movements to complement that. And yet she's really struggling with pain in her body. And with a little bit of evaluation of her history and also watching her move, I realized that she has a vestibular deficit, which means her middle ear is not operating quite as it should. And so we started doing a few very basic tests of it, and it was very apparent that the system is just not working well.
Mm.
So no matter how much she rehabs or diversifies her training schedule, she's not going to get to the root cause of her problem.
Wow.
And what that's going to mean is it's almost, I use the metaphor of fighting a forest fire with a pistol gun.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
always, you're going to get a few flames that are going to die, and then they're just going to come right back up at you. And so that's why sometimes zooming out and looking more holistically at the body
Mm.
is far more effective. And I think physiotherapists and physical therapists, as they are called in America, have also been indoctrinated into this allopathic model of how the body works. When we're looking at the medical world, they put their blinkers on, and if someone says my elbow hurts, they analyze the arm
Mm. Yeah.
or the neck. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll go as far as the neck, but the problem could be as low as the toe or as high as visual issues. And
Mm.
these seemingly unrelated problems actually do show up as pain in the body.
Interesting. Good answer. I went through your Instagram page, which is amazing. Everyone listening, please go follow Celeste at Celeste Pereira Physio. And I noticed that you said it's a myth that the feet should always be parallel. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
It was just something that I noticed a lot in the yoga community where people were really encouraged to have their feet in parallel, whether that's in a downward facing dog or at the top of the mat in Tadasana. And whilst I do appreciate finding some kind of neutral alignment can be useful for a lot of stuff, I don't want people to think that that's the finish line. Like, let's call it a starting point, but it's so important for us to get good at lunging like a warrior, or even in the gym with our weights. Just get your feet out of parallel and sometimes do things with internal rotation and sometimes do things with external rotation,
Mm.
because our brain needs to map all of the possibilities, and it can only do that through experience. So if we don't use it, we lose it. And what I see a lot in my clinic is that people have just, like you mentioned earlier, people are doing the same thing the same way over and over. And we're missing huge maps in our brain. And people will often come to me with problems, and it's either trauma related or disuse atrophy.
Mm,
And what those words mean is just that statement, don't use it, you lose it. So they're actually getting pain in their body or having issues with focus, clarity. And it's mainly just because their brain is starting to shrink in size. And it shrinks more rapidly the older we get. We actually have to increase demand on our brain rapidly as we age, and demand on our physical bodies and our cognitive abilities to help keep our neural tissue intact.
mm. Great point. That made me think about, I remember at one time someone had said in relation to, say, Prasarita Padottanasana or wide foot forward folding stretch that, okay, bring your feet parallel. If you want a deeper stretch, do an internal rotation. But if you're experiencing sciatica pain, turn your toes into an external rotation or out. Do you think there's any validity to that, or is that a bit of a myth as well?
What's happening when you go into internal rotation is you are putting those nerves on a bigger stretch. But to say that someone with sciatica will, should just turn their feet out, I think people with sciatica, depending on its severity, could still be quite compromised in a forward fold.
Mm,
So again, it would really depend. And also, I don't know if it's really appropriate if a yoga teacher would say a blanket statement like that in a yoga class, particularly because really if someone has sciatica, yoga can be quite aggravating simply because of all the forward folds. So did they say that for downward dog? Did they say that for every forward fold through the Surya Namaskar? It's actually less neural tension because the legs are abducted, they're spread apart.
mm,
When you're going into a forward fold, the legs are adducted, and that's even more aggravating for sciatica.
uh,
So I would hope that if they are helping to rehab, that's great. But are you actually applying those same principles intelligently through the poses that are actually even more aggressive for those nerves?
nice. Good point. That's cool. Can you, how, I noticed that you have a terminology for ways that you teach called functional neurology. Can you give a little bit of insight into like, what does that big word mean?
Yeah, functional neurology. Well, of course, we have a brain, and what many people don't realize, like, let's use the example of having stronger legs to do your lunges better. Like, that's a simple example. A lot of people think that to get the quads stronger, we have to load the quads, we have to keep doing more and more quad exercises. And they're absolutely correct. But a large percentage of the strength that's available to your body, in fact, even just the ability to move your leg, it all comes from the brain. Every single thing that you do, think, say, every process in your body, it's all governed from the central nervous system. Everything. And people forget this, they really look at the body from the neck down. So when they want to get better at pose, they practice the pose or poses that look similar to the pose. But actually, there's so much we can do in terms of the brain. And I'll use a forward fold as an example. If we want to get better at touching our toes, this is called flexion in the body, right? It's a flexed spine, and we got flexion of the hips. To get better at that, we can actually, instead of just practicing forward folds, go to a brain region that sets your reflexive flexor tone. And two come to mind. The first one is in the brainstem, one of the oldest parts and lowest parts of your brain, called the midbrain, and another part of the brainstem, which is called the medulla. So you've got these two areas. Both of these have the job of reflexively getting your flexor tone to light up. And I can actually improve someone's forward folds by just lighting up those two parts of the brain.
Hmm.
There's an old statement in neurology called neurons that wire together, fire together. So in the midbrain, for example, you've got little receptors that sense if you need to take a breath. And if you haven't breathed in a while, they'll start to contract your breathing muscles. And they're also right next to the neurons that give you this ability to flex your body, like touch your toes. So if I get someone to hold their breath, I can actually light up the midbrain. And then when I recheck their forward fold, they can often go deeper.
Mm,
Another process that lives in the midbrain helps us to bring our eyes together. You and I staring at a screen right now, looking at each other. So our eyes are in what we call convergence. They're together. If we had to look out the window and look far away, our eyes would go into divergence. Now, one of the ways I could get someone to be better at their forward folds is I can actually get them to practice convergence by bringing their thumb to the tip of their nose repeatedly. And then I get them to recheck their forward fold. And again, really frequently, I'm finding people can then do their forward fold so much better. So,
Interesting.
whilst we do want to do reps and repetitions, because this helps to increase the brain's mapping and improve the muscles and the joints, of course, all of that's important. We can also shorten the time it takes to achieve things in the body by going to the neural tissue first.
So cool. I did see a post that you did that said, "This is not real yoga," which I think, is intriguing. Like, oh, what she's gonna do? That's not real. But you kind of demonstrated maybe going, like you said, into a warrior pose and then doing that same technique that you just talked about, bringing the thumb close to your eyes and bringing it away, and then coordinating that in different positions. I thought that was so interesting. I haven't seen that yet before.
Well,
And
what's interesting is through the history of yoga, they did actually have different eye movements, but it has kind of been lost a little bit in translation. People aren't utilizing some of those tools anymore. And I think it also just depends on, like, history is always written by whoever is popular at the time. And I think that when Patabi Joyce and Iyengar kind of reached mainstream within the yoga world, a lot of the other kind of Tibetan practices that utilized eye movements sort of fell to the wayside. Thankfully, we still have a really rich pranayama that has infiltrated the practice. For some styles, though, that hasn't really been integrated at its highest level. I'm guilty of that as well. I'm definitely not pointing any fingers at anyone for this evolution. It really is the yoga teachers doing their best to serve their community in the way they know how. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is the thing about yoga, in my humble opinion, is that it's a living art and that it's adapting. And I think it's important that we take time to look at all the different things that kind of formulate yoga and understand that potentially there's a few things that need to change as well as we move forward and we tweak the practice, really to help people to make, I should say this instead, to make yoga sustainable in their bodies.
Mm, very cool. Can you explain a little bit what you meant by the process of holding the breath? That how does holding the breath fire the lower brain stem, like you made mention of?
Yeah, the upper brainstem, the midbrain.
Upper brain, sorry,
It's called the midbrain, but it's actually the top portion of the brainstem. So all very confusing. But so the brainstem has the ability to sense if you have elevated levels of carbon dioxide in your blood. And I want to use the example of a coffee drinker. So imagine someone's drinking coffee. If the more coffee you drink, the more immune to coffee you become. Like, you've got these people who are like, I can drink coffee at 11 at night and I go straight back to sleep, no problem.
yeah.
And the reason they were able to do that is they have formed more receptors on their brain so that they have a lot of availability to get that coffee molecule to bind. And if someone like me who never drinks coffee drinks a coffee, even if it's 5 a.m. in the morning, I will be running like a headless chicken until late at night because I have so few receptors. They bind so quick, they're all full, and I've got all this leftover caffeine, which is rushing through my bloodstream, which makes me feel really jacked up. So for me, I need to be really mindful of my coffee intake. Well, in your brainstem, you've got these receptors which bind with carbon dioxide. And what we find when we look at the general population, because of the introduction of knives and forks and soft food, our palate has shrunk dramatically from our ancestors. In addition to that, our breathing space, for lack of a better term, has also shrunk. So imagine all the airways, I should call them, all the airways of your nostrils and down into your lungs. These airways have also become smaller. So what's happening is we're utilizing mouth breathing unconsciously, particularly when we sleep, and actually even as far as when we're doing exercise. And what this is doing is it's blowing all of our carbon dioxide off. We're blowing a lot of it out of our bodies. So what happens is when we hold our breath, we don't have a lot of those carbon dioxide receptors on the brainstem. So we hold our breath, and all of the carbon dioxide that is in the blood quickly binds to those receptors. And then you've got a lot left over in your blood, and your brain goes, "It's too much carbon dioxide. I can't cope." So then you start to pant, and you'll do a big breath to sigh and let it all out. Um, and what's actually interesting is we can train our brain to develop more receptors for carbon dioxide by holding our breath. And this is really important because we actually need to have a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide for oxygen to be able to get into our tissues. So it's actually a useful thing to be able to learn how to hold your breath, because when you do, you increase your amount of and carbon dioxide doesn't just let your oxygen float around in your blood. It's like opening the door of the taxi, and it says, "Please enter the tissues." And then oxygen is able to get into your brain and your muscles and your tissues, like your organs. When I measure the oxygen saturation of someone who has a breathing pathology like COPD, we see that they have really great oxygen in their blood, but they have blue lips
Mm.
because they're not able to get the oxygen into their tissues. And when I ask them, "Can you hold your breath?" they can do it for a few seconds, and they start to pant. They would pant walking to the toilet,
Mm.
even if it's just a few steps away.
Yep.
And it's because of their CO2 tolerance is very low.
Interesting. I'm guessing you had to have read Breath by James Nestor.
Of course.
Isn't that
What a legend. I interviewed
what
him
a
on my
legend?
podcast.
Did you really? No
I
way. That's
did.
awesome.
He was the
Uh,
first interviewee actually. I was like you will come on my podcast and you're the first
Wow.
one. Like legend, yeah.
That's so cool. I did write him to try to get him to be a guest, and he was kind enough to respond, which I thought was so cool, but
Oh,
he's extremely busy. But that's amazing that you got him on. Wasn't that fascinating to
amazing.
hear the way he researched going down under the tunnels in France and looking at skulls from like back
Oh,
prior to what you're
incredible.
talking about with like the mushy food that we eat before when we were actually
Yeah.
chewing on carrots and celery and stuff. And
He
so
did a really good job
it's
of that
so
book.
interesting. Did you ever read his other one, Deep, where he
You know
chronicles?
what? I've heard of it, but
Yeah,
I
it's
must
so
get it. It's
good.
on my
It's
list.
just as entertaining. Yeah. That's so
Yeah, he's
cool.
brilliant.
That's fascinating. So then when you're doing an assessment of somebody and you're wanting to help them improve their, say, forward flexion ability, like you're saying, hold your breath. Are you just waiting for them to hold as long as they can? Or are you saying, let's try to hold it for 30 seconds? What's your protocol in relation to that?
My protocol would be to do something called air hunger. I wanted to keep, because of what I'm explaining to you guys, and those of you who are still with me, thank you, because it's very complicated, some of the things I'm saying. And so when I first spoke about the holding your breath, I tried to keep it as simple as possible. So I just said, hold your breath. But since you've asked, actually, the way I would do it is something with a tool, which I believe everyone should do every single day. It's called air hunger. And what air hunger is that you're doing movement whilst holding your breath after you've breathed out. So you'll breathe out all the air, and you'll hold your breath, and then you'll go walking, or you'll do squats or push-ups, whatever floats your boat. And what we want to do is we want to get people to do that body weight exercise just until they feel that's enough, and they only take one breath to recover. And that's a really important distinction, because what we don't want to do is push them so far that they then pant and release all their CO2. We want them to retain the CO2. So ideally, they would hold their breath until it's uncomfortable, and then they go, just the one breath. And then
Mm.
they would potentially have a period where they take a bit of time to just relax, and then they would go again. They could do as many rounds as they feel comfortable doing, and we just do see a really great upregulation of their flexor tone. That goes for forward folds, push up, shoulder flexion. So if they're trying to get into handstand or downward dog, oh my gosh, this works incredibly well.
Interesting. So let me try to imagine I'm going to pick the squats. I take a big breath in. I exhale. I hold my breath with no air in my body, do as many squats as I can, but not too crazy so that
Exactly.
when I have to breathe, I take a big breath in, inhale, I exhale, and
And
then
then you need to be calm.
And just be calm. So don't go right back to the squats right away and then like, forget the
No, no,
brain
no.
drill. Yeah. Yeah.
Have a bit of recovery time. Have a little recovery time, even if it's a few
Yeah.
seconds.
That's
Some people need
interesting.
longer. I work with people that have had severe brain traumas, um, and they're rehabbing from that. And because in the time that they've been trying to rehab, they've literally just been laying down.
Mm,
And so for them to try and hold their breath for a long time is really not appropriate. I don't want to spike their threat and push
yeah.
them
Yeah.
further into their symptoms. So I would get them sometimes to hold it just for 10 seconds and
Yeah.
then to take a 1 minute break.
Very
Sometimes I would get people to do 15 squats holding their breath, and then they would take a 1 second break. Like, this is how variable it can be depending on the person.
got it. And you recommend every day. And just like make it like a
Yeah.
5 minute exercise. Like don't, it doesn't have to be like an hour long thing. Just
It doesn't even have to
give
be
it a
five
shot.
minutes. When
Okay.
I go for
5
my
minutes.
morning
Yeah.
walk, I will just do 3 rounds of air hunger for as many steps as I can.
That's cool. Air hunger. I like that.
It sounds weird, but it works so well. And I'll just give you one other reason why it
Please.
works.
Please.
Your brainstem is at the oldest part of your brain. It's right at the bottom of your brain, and the when we light up the brainstem, it's really powerful because our brain takes in fuel from the bottom to the top and the back to the front. It's literally like a sponge that you've dipped in water, and it has the mechanism to sort of absorb water from the back portion and slowly keep absorbing it until it reaches the front. And so the brainstem, what we see is if people haven't got enough fuel going through their whole brain, that's when they really struggle. So sometimes I'm actually giving them all the right stuff. I'm giving them all these cool drills and I'm really trying to give them my best physio stuff and nothing's working. And then later I'm like, oh, you don't have enough fuel. And the two forms of fuel that the brain takes in is oxygen and glucose. So, like, what have you eaten today and how long ago? And how are you breathing? And potentially there's something wrong with your brainstem. And so it's absorbing all of your fuel and it's not getting to the rest of your cortex. And so if you do air hunger, it just helps to get a bit more fuel to the rest of the brain because we're lighting up. Not only are we lighting up the midbrain, which is very near the bottom of your brain, but we're also sending additional fuel with the oxygen the CO2 levels rather, pulling the oxygen into the brain. So just lots of good stuff is happening.
Yeah. What has been your experience with exploring yogic style pranayama techniques and then it sounds like, obviously from the physio and or exercise science world, there's a certain way to approach breathing practices like you mentioned. Have you explored I don't want to say traditional, but like old school yoga style breathing practices?
Yeah, I have. And I'll have to be honest with your community and say that not recently, because I've been down this rabbit hole of neuroscience and working quite hard on that and more on the functional rehab perspective. There are people who do trauma rehabilitation through a lot of the different hyperventilating techniques.
Mm,
And I don't know much about that, if I'm really honest. It's definitely on my path to get there.
yeah,
There's just been a lot of other information, as you can hear, that's kind of
yeah,
taken a front
yeah,
seat.
yeah.
But what I can say is that one of the things that's really been highlighted to me through my personal journey with researching this content is that with yogic breathing techniques, we just do need to be careful that we don't assume that these breathing techniques are good for everyone.
Mm, yeah,
Because what I would do in my clinical practice is I would test. Like, I would give you air hunger and then I would check, is your forward fold improving? And if it doesn't, if it actually gets worse, that's a sign maybe air hunger is not the right breathing drill for you. And
yeah,
that's okay. We're
yeah.
all different. And I do feel that potentially in the world of exercise, yoga, breathing techniques, they're not testing their work. They're
Mm,
not testing, does this nervous system want cold exposure? Does
yeah,
this nervous system respond well to a hot water bottle? Should we be doing Bastrika with this person? They're just going, oh, this is an ancient form of breathing, so it's definitely good. Let's go.
yeah. Good point. That's
No.
interesting. Yeah.
And the other thing is when we are doing hyperventilating techniques, whether that is for trauma release or it is just because you're in a yoga class, we need to put a bigger emphasis on recovery because of the CO2 that we are losing, and because of the fact that in modern life we tend to release so much of our CO2, we don't have adequate blood gas levels. So, and that's not across the board, guys. I'm sorry if that came across as a blanket statement. It's just obviously I work with a very niche set of population.
Yeah.
So take what I say with a massive grain of salt. You are extremely resilient. Your body is very adaptable. And I just want you to make sure that whatever you're doing, don't force it because you've been told this should be good for you. If it doesn't feel good, you are so welcome to abandon anything any teacher ever gives you. Don't feel forced to do anything just because you're told by someone else this is good.
Yeah, great point. What got you all fired up about all of this? What was a turning point in your life where you realized this is what I want to do? This is what I'm going to focus on?
I'm really glad you asked that because I really want to give a big shout out to the people and the teacher who's basically given me so much knowledge. I obviously did a degree in physical therapy and I worked as a physio. And it was really frustrating because I just wasn't getting results with people. If I'm honest, I was doing traditional rehab, looking at someone who's not, got pain in their knee and would strengthen their quads and strengthen their hamstrings and their glutes, and their knee pain wouldn't go away. And that was very frustrating. And it was around the beginning of the pandemic that I ended up meeting Dr. Eric Cobb,
Mm,
who I really he's just not given the credit he deserves. He's taught so many people about the brain, and he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, a genius of a man. And he created an education system called Z Health Performance. And in addition to my degree, I've just been slowly chipping away at all of his incredible courses. And I feel like at last, utilizing the principles that he has shared, at last able to make some real profound changes in the people that have come to see me for various different things, as aggressive as brain trauma, all the way through to simple. I had yesterday a lady, bless her, she had a terrible, like a crook in her neck, we'll call it. Like, when you wake up and you have a crook in your neck. Well, she's had it for 2 years.
mm.
And for 2 years, this poor lady hasn't been able to really function very well. Terrible migraines off the back of this tension on her one side. And actually, she's similar to the lady I saw today. I just gave her a few vestibular drills, and at last she was like, oh my goodness, I can move. Like, this is life changing. And she
Wow.
was like, it's the first time in 2 years that I've been able to move my neck and my shoulder without any pain. And
Mm,
that we were together for an hour. Like, it's just
yeah,
wild.
that's
So,
amazing.
just credit to Dr. Cobb, Dr. Eric Cobb. Please look him up. Please look up Z Health. Everyone in the world,
Check it out.
please take his courses. Some of them are free, even. Just, he's got loads of free YouTube content. Just really, really worth devouring his content and going to the source. I know I share all this great stuff, but really, he's
Awesome.
very, very smart.
Yeah, I will definitely check them out, and I appreciate you mentioning
Do
that. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question then,
Of
since I have you
course.
here? I I have back pain. I have a degenerative disc in between my L5S1 with a spondylolisthesis where my L5 is
Hmm.
slipped forward, but I've been dealing with it for a really long time, but then I finally
Hmm.
pushed things a little way too far, which caused me to start getting MRIs and then going, oh, well, maybe that's why I have some back pain.
Mm,
And so I'm finding that extension does not feel good at all.
mm.
Flexion feels great. What have you come across in relation to helping people rehab either spondylolisthesis and or degenerative disc down in the lumbar?
I'm so happy you asked this question. Thank you so much for sharing it, your personal story.
Oh
And
man, I can't wait to.
honestly,
I've learned
honestly, I'm
so
so
much.
I'm so jazzed that you asked this. So
I'm
two big things I want to share with you, and then we can maybe talk about some strategies for your unique body. But I'm hoping everyone listens. Just here's this next message. Like, they did this incredible study where they took a huge sample size of 3,600 people, is
wow.
massive, right? And they analyzed people from the age of 20 to the age of 80. Like, they did every decade, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40, all the way through to 80s. And they ensured that every single person in their sample size had no pain. That was their one criteria.
Wow.
And then what they did is they analyzed their backs. They started scanning their backs with MRIs to check What's going on in these people's spines? Do they have nothing going on? Do they have something going on? And what was so awesome is they found out that every single age bracket had something going on.
Mm,
It just increases, it just slowly increased as people got older. But bear in mind, none of these people had pain. They found spondylolisthesis, they found degenerative disc disease, facet joint syndrome, um, degenerative changes were across the board from the 20s, but nobody had pain. And the conclusion that they used when pain researchers started, they did some really cool studies to look at pain. But that was one of the big studies that really got researchers thinking that degenerative changes in your spine are very normal, but it doesn't mean you will end up in pain.
mm. Oh gosh, that's so nice to hear.
It's so good.
But doesn't that sound like
So,
that backs I don't want to interrupt you, but doesn't that back
no, no, no.
Dr. Sarno's work with healing your
Oh,
backs? He kind
I
of
don't know him.
okay, cool. Sorry. All right.
No, no, it's
I
okay.
want to hear more. I don't want to interrupt you.
Sorry, I just dropped my AirPod. That's why I did a woo. um, so I want you guys to think of like this is where the pain research is so fascinating, because when these researchers started looking at all these amazing different experiments, they started realizing that pain is not it's not got anything to do with your body necessarily. Pain is exclusively an output the brain chooses based off of how safe it feels. So potentially you've got something wrong in your back, as you do, and potentially you'll feel pain because of that. But very often it's in combination with a lot of other factors. And I want you guys to remember this one important thing. There are no pain receptors in your body, but what we do have is something called nociceptors. And nociceptors sense when you are under threat. Now, I want you to imagine a bucket. You wake up with the alarm, wow, 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 crying out at you, and it shocks you awake. Your threat fills up a little bit. First thing you do in the morning is you put the TV on. Guess what? The news is on, and there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world, and it could affect your world. Threat fills up a little bit. You then get stuck in traffic. Your threat fills up a little bit. You've been sat in a chair all day. Disuse atrophy. Your threat fills up a little more. You then go to a yoga teacher's class and she's constantly saying, make sure your knee is 90 degrees to protect your knee. Don't do XYZ because you need to protect your back. Squeeze your core tight so that you keep your back safe. So she's instilling this message that you are vulnerable. Your threat fills up. And eventually something happens. Let's say you have a fight with your best friend or your significant other, your partner, and your threat overflows and your brain is like, I can't keep you safe. My job is to keep you safe and I cannot. So I'm going to give you some pain, because when you're in pain, it's going to slow you down. It's going to put you in bed.
Mm,
Now, that's not to say that pain is not real. And it's not to say that you can mind over matter pain. If you've got serious things going on in your body, like what you've got is serious, but also we'll need to evaluate your eyes, your middle ear, your brain. How well are you processing the information coming into your brain? Or did you suffer from a car accident and your brain can't process the incoming information very well?
mm,
That's very threatening. So things like dizziness, nausea, pain, stiffness, weakness, these are all signs that the brain is trying to keep you safe. I'll give another example. Imagine you're about to do a backflip, but you've never done a backflip before, ever. So you stand, you bend your knees, and you're like, okay, here I go. What do you think the jump into the backbend's gonna look like?
mm. Not very enthusiastic. Yeah.
It's going to be like, woo! It's not going to be
Yeah.
much of anything, because your brain is going to make you weaker and smaller and everything's going to tighten up because it knows that you've never done a backflip before. And
Mm,
the brain's always trying to predict the future. And it's like, I mean, if my past experience is anything to go on, this backflip's not going to go very well. And we are in danger of hitting our most valuable asset, which is our head. And so you're not going to be able to go very far. In fact, you might even develop your pain. Your pain in your back might get worse. Oh, suddenly, oh, that feels worse for some reason. It's just because your brain is like, whoa, 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 you need to go back in your box, big man. Like, you're not ready for this backflip, dude. And so the brain is always communicating with us, but unfortunately, it just uses really obscure methods of communication, which don't give us a clear indication of what's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, that's fascinating.
It's a good
Wow.
one.
Wow. I mean, so, well, first of all, I mean, it definitely made me think too in relation to what I'm telling myself, like, okay, back bending hurts, right? So now it's like,
Mm,
don't do it, don't do it. So where do I, or maybe if I don't just put it about me, but just like say all of us in general, when we have, we if we feel like we figured something out, like, okay, this is what I need to stop doing, then one of the ideas when I mentioned that author, Dr. Sarno, he has a very similar theory to what you said in relation to what he's observed in his practice. And one of his ideas is that you should get right back to doing what you're used to doing because that reservation, hesitation of like, oh boy, if I do that, that's going to be worse. If I keep doing this, it's going to be worse.
mm.
And he's kind of pointing to what you're saying, exactly the same. Like, we want to override that hesitation, maybe the hesitation is what's causing the discomfort. So how do we
It's
find that
difficult to,
fine line, of knowing like,
yeah.
gosh, if I know that hurts me, like almost like if I hit my head on the wall and I know that hurts me, obviously I don't want to keep doing
Don't
that,
want to
right?
do that.
Yeah. But
I
like
think it's a
yeah,
fine balance,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
fine balance.
yeah,
So he's right. We don't want to get into something, what he's describing is the fear avoidance pattern. This is
yeah,
a really old theory. I mean, I went to university, I graduated in 2009, and we were learning about fear avoidance strategies then, which is a vicious cycle. You hurt, so you stop moving. And because you stop moving, you hurt more. Because you're hurting more, you stop moving even more. And then you get like into this vicious cycle. So he's right. You want to train the body to move because movement is like motion is lotion, as they say, that cheesy little statement, which actually is so true. You do want to teach your body to tolerate some back bends. Maybe for you going into some wild ass deep dancers pose is not going to be appropriate, but we do want to at least get you doing glute
yeah,
bridges because that's
yeah,
a functional
yeah,
movement where we can get your glutes fired up. And that's like a nice extension to get your posterior chain working. So
yes.
we do want to gently start to get your body used to some
Great answer.
extension.
Great answer.
However, I don't want you to ever put limits on yourself because maybe we could get you back to that dancers.
Mm,
Do you know? I don't want to ever say, "Oh, you'll never walk
I
again." I
agree.
don't want to say those words to
Mhm.
anyone.
Yeah,
Like, what if
yeah,
they could? And
yeah,
then I've
yeah.
put that thought in their mind.
Great point.
However, I would want to evaluate your whole system. And when I say that, I work extraordinarily holistically. I will analyze, first of all, I take a very robust history and I'll look at what's happened in your past. Like the lady today, like with your vestibular system, they're like little canals and there's fluid in there. And if someone has kind of hormonal issues, it affects how fluid the motion runs in your canals. And a lot of her history was pointing towards hormonal things. So I was like, definitely her vestibular system is not working. I can see that looking at her history, even though she's a dancer, like imagine. So I would want to evaluate your eyes, your ears, your brain. How does it function? What's your sleep like? What's your diet like? But the biggest thing I'd want to evaluate is how are you talking to yourself when you're going into movement? What are you saying to yourself when your back is sore? And I would really try and tease out the negative loops of, oh, my bloody back again,
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
stupid back. Like, honestly, like that kind of, which really your back is just doing what it's supposed to do and letting you know that it's not safe. So
yeah.
that's actually a good thing. So it's like developing a different relationship with pain would be a big step in the rehab process.
Nice. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for all this information. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on walking? In
Oh, yeah,
terms of
walking is good.
importance of walking, just for in general, do you
Yeah.
recommend to your clients that are saying it's painful for me to walk?
Oh, for
Like
your
say
kind
if
of condition.
or even neck pain or shoulder. Like sometimes when people are on their feet for a long period of time, they're like, oh my god, it's so painful.
Mm.
Have you do you? Do you see just walking as a form of therapy?
That's a really good question, Todd. And I use what we call gait analysis to
Mm,
check people's walking, and I can tell a lot about what's going on in their brain looking at the way they walk, because there's certain patterns that come up again and again. And then when you tweak those parts of the brain, we see the patterns go away. It's really wild.
yeah.
So walking is very, very powerful. It's a very healthy thing to do. We've evolved to take many, many steps every day, and we don't do enough. I would say that movement is so, so crucial. So if you are someone who's going to walk, great. But I'll give the example of my dad. He's struggled with terrible arthritis since the age of 20. Walking is so painful for him. And he just really loves to ride a bike. He just loves getting on his bike. So I would always encourage him, like, get on your
Yeah.
bike when you take the dog for a walk,
Yeah.
because I don't want him to be in pain. I want him to have as much pain-free time as possible.
Yeah.
And so it depends. It
Yeah.
depends on the
Good point.
person.
Good point. This is a totally off topic question. So for those listening, please bear with me, but I just have to ask Celeste this question. What size kite did you fly last time you went kite
7.
surfing? A 7 meter?
7.
A
Yeah. And
seven
I'm
is so
just getting my jumps at the moment. So
are
I
you
can't tell you the joy. It's just the best thing in the world.
strapped in or are you riding a surfboard?
I'm strapped in at the moment. I'm strapped in, but it's definitely a goal of mine to get a surfboard.
And obviously it's gotta be so cold over there. What's so like, are you kiting in the winter or only in the summer?
Yeah,
And
I
what
kite
size
all year
wetsuit are you
round.
do you? So you do in the
Yeah.
winter in England as well?
Oh, 100%. And
What
it was so
what
funny.
beach are
I'm wearing a big, thick wetsuit, and I just messaged my brother like late last night going, we've got to go to the surf shop because the wetsuit that I've got is either not warm enough, I get too cold,
Yeah.
or the one that I've got that's thick enough, it drinks water like it's not a very good one. And I end up looking like the Michelin Man. Do you guys have that? Do
Yeah.
you guys have the Michelin Man in America?
Well, we do,
You
but
know,
more
the like little
yeah,
chubby
yeah.
guy.
Well,
That's how I
yeah.
look when I get out the water, because the ankles are so tight, the
Which
water
is
is not
super
leaving,
heavy.
but the
Yeah,
water's
yeah,
coming in exactly. So I'm
yeah,
powering up my kite,
yeah, yeah.
and then eventually it's not strong enough to get me up, and I have to leave the water.
Have you had that experience yet where you try to launch in air and you swing the kite really high back up and you get up in the air and then you don't coordinate the flow of the kite back forward again, you get completely body slammed?
Yeah, I love it.
All right. I'm telling you, right? You
I'm
gotta
so
get hooked
obsessed
around
with
it.
kite surfing.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's the
So
best.
well, thank you for indulging me there. So, when you offer yoga teacher training, what are questions
Mm.
that you find you get asked the most in relation to, say, anatomy and yoga?
So you're saying if someone wants to join my teacher training,
Hmm.
what question would they ask?
Well, no, like when you conduct teacher training,
Oh, I see your
what
point.
what are some of like the big questions that you get that you just feel like you get it again and
Mm.
again, like you keep addressing?
You know, I have to say I drop a lot of bombshells. And so people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. Did you just say we should not be engaging our core? That's the first thing that popped into mind. So it's
Cool.
less a question and more like a hang on, hang on. Did I understand you correctly?
Can you
Big one,
explain that?
guys.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Why would I not want to engage my core, or what am I getting wrong about this concept of core?
It's a pandemic of people just over engaging. Just like let's use the bicep as an example.
Over engaging.
Let's just during this chat together, this next few minutes, just keep
Okay.
your bicep tense with me. We'll do it
Okay.
together.
All
Just
right.
keep it up there.
Yeah.
So like really tense, yeah. Come on, everyone at home, join us with the funny arm, and really squeeze your fist and your bicep, like really go for it. And just how long can you think you can sustain this intense contraction?
Before it cramps up, I don't know, 60 seconds maybe.
Maybe. Okay. And how long are we expecting the core and pelvic floor to stay contracted?
The core, the pelvic floor to contract.
And yeah, Mula and
Like,
Uddiyana Bandha in a yoga
yeah.
class. Like, how long do we want that contraction?
We're told if we're doing it for 90 minutes, for 90 minutes, like the whole
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Go on. Now
Right.
squeeze your arm a little more for that 90 seconds and then relax. And try and now do dexterity with that hand.
Yeah.
Imagine you're going to pick up a crystal glass.
Mm,
We expect so much from these muscles. They haven't evolved to grip into a single rigid hold. They've evolved to adapt to the pressure system. Put your hands on your ribs and feel your ribs are moving because air is filling up your ribs, your lungs rather. And this is making your diaphragm push down. Now move your hands to where your belly is. What's happening to the organs?
mm,
They should be moving. And so the core should be loading eccentrically. That means the muscle fibers are lengthening as you inhale and concentrically as you breathe out. And when a muscle moves through range, it's a healthy, strong muscle. You're engaging it into a single rigid hold. That muscle is not strong. You take anybody who keeps their muscle on one single level contracted, it's not a strong muscle. It's very weak. It's overactive, but weak.
mm,
Cannot do a good bicep curl if you hold your bicep at a single rigid hold for 90 minutes.
mm.
You're
Yeah.
not going to get your best rep. And so it's the same with the core. We need to load along with respiration. When you look at ultrasounds of the pelvic floor and the core, you can actually see the muscle fibers doing this, which is eccentric, concentric, eccentric, concentric. As the diaphragm moves, they move together. Imagine the cogs of a machine. Imagine four cogs and how when they turn, the other one turns. Now jam one of them straight. What's going to happen to the others?
Mm,
They're not going to move.
yep. Yep.
So your diaphragm is the leads the charge, right? The diaphragm's moving. It wants to keep you alive. It's moving up and down. But now your core is rigid. What's going to happen to the diaphragm? It's not going to be able to move as
Oh,
well. It's
yeah.
going to be rigid too. And your diaphragm, everyone thinks the core is your trunk stabilizer. It is, but my God, the diaphragm. The diaphragm connects low as L3 and it is your biggest core stabilizer and it is a powerful muscle and it needs to move to function well. When we get people to grip at 30%, we
Mm,
see a reduction in lumbar stability.
mm. That makes
You
me think
know,
then we're in downward facing dog. Don't try to really squeeze core. Just
in
breathe
any
deeply
pose, just
in
let it
any
move.
situation. Just
Let
so
it
don't
move.
grip. Don't grip it. No.
No, no.
All right. So
And it's just
that blows the minds
everywhere
for
I
sure,
go.
right? Yeah, it's
Every
everywhere.
single class I take, navel to spine, engage your core,
Mm,
squeeze it tight, your back is vulnerable. And I'm like, you're not taking into account the pressure system. When your core moves, it's not vulnerable. That's a strong position. You've got a lot packed in. You've got air, diaphragm is contracted as it's moving down. Yes, pelvic floor and transverse abdominis are loading eccentrically, but they are not weak there. It's like taking your bicep curl example again and lowering your weight down to the ground. It's not weak. It's just lowering down.
yeah.
Yes, it looks really strong when you curl it up against gravity, but that doesn't mean that it's weak.
Interesting. So then you're implementing during your own practice, just relax. And then every now and again, when it seems appropriate, if I have to squeeze, go ahead and squeeze it. But then I'm aware of that, relax again and just keep breathing. Nice.
If you can squeeze it if it's appropriate. So, for
Yeah.
example, a lot of people who've had core and pelvic floor trauma, maybe they've delivered or maybe they've had an operation, they maybe lose connection, that neural connection to those muscles. So, sensory feedback would be really important, like placing your hands on all of those different muscles and feeling the relationship of what a contraction versus a relaxation would feel like. That's awesome.
Mm,
If they are doing a movement that's very demanding, tuning into those muscles, feeling it contract and release along with the breath, there should be no rigid holds. And then, in addition to that, recognizing that that is the starting point, but not the finish line. The finish line is that you reflexively let the brain do its thing. You shouldn't be overriding those unconscious processes with your conscious demands. And this is especially a good example. Again, the bicep. Let's imagine I'm about to drink a cup of water. Who thinks about their bicep when they're drinking water?
Nobody.
And who whacks themselves so hard that they have blood coming out of their face? Or
Limited
who
spine coordination.
struggles to lift the cup up because they're not engaging into their bicep enough? It's a very small percentage of the population with those two issues. Most people just drink the water without thinking. They're busy typing, talking on the phone, listening to the radio all at once, and they're drinking their water.
Yeah.
Hot
Yeah.
drinks,
Yeah. Hot drink.
just the right amount of sensitivity coming to their lips, just the right amount of tilt, and we're not thinking about it.
Yes.
Why do we have to think about the core so hard? Just trust your body, please. Your body is so smart. Stop messing it up with thinking about everything so intensely. Your body's got this. Just
Amazing,
move
Celeste.
and relax. Chill out.
Amazing. You've been trained in the physio world as well as the yoga world. What are your thoughts on loaded flexion? For example, like a pose, standing leg raises or titasta padangustasana, you grab your foot,
Yeah.
and that's like a heavy item, and you're in
Yeah, that's
flexion.
pretty good.
What do you
That's pretty
think?
good.
You like it?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love
cool.
it.
Do you feel like
100%.
in the physio world, is there this idea that you should never do loaded flexion or
No, I mean, maybe, but I hope not. Your body is resilient and strong. You can do so
you
much
can
as long as as
I,
long as you've
I see what you're saying.
progressively
Yeah,
built up
yeah,
to it, go
yeah,
for it. Your body,
yeah.
oh my God, guys, just listen to me. Your body is so resilient. It can do so much. The big problem is we've been told we're fragile.
Yeah.
We are not fragile.
I feel the underlying theme of your message. I like it.
I mean, if you want to get really good at anything, progressively build up to it. But
Yeah,
don't think that it's wrong or bad.
yeah,
Please,
yeah.
please don't ever let those thoughts enter your brain because they've done all these, in again, really cool studies where they analyzed, you know, different verbal cues. And it's actually a bigger issue that we're telling people to do something to protect our joints. That's a bigger issue than actually doing the movements
Mm,
because your brain works on a predictive mechanism. It's trying to predict the future. Am I safe? Am I safe if I do this? Am I safe if I do that? Now you're being told, do this to protect your knee. Oh, my knee needs protection. Oh, okay. Okay, I've got to be careful with my knees. I've got to be careful how I move. Now we're in the fear cycle. Remember that
mm,
vicious cycle I spoke
mm,
about? Oh, I'm not
mm.
going to move as much with my knee because my knee is vulnerable. I need to protect my knees. That yoga teacher told me, my knees, be careful with your knees.
Yes.
Imagine if every yoga teacher was like, your knees are so strong and so resilient. Just today, we're going to go knee over ankle. Tomorrow, we're going to go knee beyond ankle. The next day, knee behind ankle. You're going to get good of all of them. If it doesn't feel right, ease back to neutral. And then we're going to slowly get you ready to go to all the ranges possible because your body can do it. We just have to get you there slowly.
Love it. Love it. Yes, Celeste. That's awesome. I'm so excited I got a chance to meet you. Thank you so much. I mean, I can't believe it's already almost an hour and I still have so many questions, but I think that's probably so much information for anyone listening to digest. Like usually I find an hour is like just good enough to, then take a couple deep breaths and chill out after. Is there anything what did we miss? What could I ask you? Or any final thoughts that you really want to hit home with here to conclude?
I think the biggest one is really listen to how you talk to yourself. I know you get told this low. Everyone's heard it before, but I mean, really listen. Like, what is exactly are you saying to yourself moment to moment? And if the thoughts are very unconscious and just running away from you, could you just take a moment to pause and tune into the supercomputer slash utter most precious gift you've been given, which is your body, and just send some good energy down into it. Say thank you. I don't even know if half the things that you do even are in existence in medical literature. That's how complex you are. And you're just doing it for me. Like you're just doing it. And I don't always drink enough water or get enough sleep. I work really hard or I put myself second. And yet here you are waking up for me each and every day. Just thank you. Thank you for that. Just once a day, if you could just sneak in that little narrative. Or if there is a movement that you're struggling with, like your back bends, like when you're slowly grading your body up towards it, just be like, I trust you so much. You've gotten me this far. I can ride the water with a kite, for God's sake. Like that's so impressive. And it's because of your incredible abilities, body. Like, thanks. Like, as if you're talking to a kid, you know, you would always want
Yeah.
to say nice things to your
Yeah.
kids and you would want to build them up. Please give yourself that same kindness. Like, it's so important.
Ah, beautiful message. That's amazing, Celeste. Well, what a treat. I'm so thankful. And I appreciate you accepting the invitation and being so kind. And I can't wait to just keep digesting more of your information that you're putting out. It's just so great. So thank you, Celeste.
It's a huge pleasure. And I'd like to also thank you for inviting me, to all your listeners, and especially for all your well prepared questions. Thank you so much. I know how much time and effort a podcast like this takes.
No,
And so, yeah, you're really serving so many people doing this. And, you know, my message, what I always say is even if you just reach one person, you've made a difference somehow. And I know for a fact that you're reaching that one person and making a difference to them. So, thank you to you too.
thanks, Celeste. I'll see you soon.